Hi, I'm Geoff Turner and I'm interested in anything that's got an engine in it. So my passion for cars would have been, I got from my dad. He always played with cars when he was younger, purely because he couldn't afford to pay anyone else to work on them, so he had to do it himself. Earliest memory of cars would be my dad driving us away on weekends, going to visit relatives, and I always wanted to steer the car. Back then it would have been a FC Holden, which later on I learned how to drive in up at Uncle's farm. Well, that was the first car I actually physically drove on my own with Dad beside me. That was awesome. Still remember it. That's 60 odd years ago. What sort of drivers were my parents? Pretty good. Dad was a good driver. He actually used to race go-karts in the early days on dirt, so whenever we come on a dirt road he'd always go sideways around the first corner. Mum wasn't happy about that, but Dad was Dad. He did what he wanted. Mum was a good driver too. Never had any issues that I ever remember. My love of vehicles or engines or whatever came from early on, as I said before, with Dad, but I did a motor mechanic apprenticeship, started that in 1972, worked at Melford Motors in Melbourne. That was a 4-year apprenticeship then, and that was the start of me wanting to get my hands dirty, I guess. At the end of the apprenticeship I changed jobs, went to another service station in Box Hill North, where I worked for a couple of years. Then that was back when they were closing all the service stations, so that closed down and I decided to go to Shepparton for a holiday with my uncle and auntie who worked at a tractor dealership. So I went up there only for a couple of weeks. That was end up being there 20 something years. My auntie had a housekeeper that used to come and do a bit of cleaning once or twice a week, and she had a daughter. And the daughter is who I ended up marrying. So I stayed in the area until 6 years ago, when we shifted. But a lot of good times in Shepparton. In 1980, we got married in 1981. A couple of years later, in 1983, we started up a motorcycle shop, just selling accessories to start with. Ended up getting the BMW franchise in 1986. That was a lot of challenges back then. We had no money, so we basically had to borrow money to get everything set up. 1991 we got the Kawasaki franchise, and that was a challenge as well. Once again, still didn't have any money, but we got by. But I got to a point where it was time to move on. I think 10 years in the business is plenty long enough. You start to get a bit burned out. But having said that, the bike shop was good to us. I actually started motorbike racing while we had the shop. It was so handy, like whatever parts were on the shelf went into the motorbike. Didn't cost me anything. It was excellent. But just don't tell my wife. Actually, I first started racing in 1975 on a Kawasaki 100. Big power unit that was, tell you. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Did that with a mate of mine. He bought one at the same time. Did that for a year or so. And then I bought a 250 Yamaha, raced that for only a couple of meetings. And basically was over that, so didn't do any more until we got the bike shop about 1984. A mate of mine who I met through the shop was racing in Post Classic. He said, why don't you get a Honda 4 and come racing? Oh, yeah, right. Huh, that was a good idea. Another thing not to tell the wife. So I found the Honda 4, just so happened to have one in stock. Just had to do a few modifications, but we got it up there. And raced that for a number of years. Then sold that and bought a couple of Yamaha proper road race, Yamaha Post Classic bikes. Ran those for a little while. Then I decided 3 wheels sounds like a good idea. So I looked around and bought a sidecar. Honda 4, of course. had to be Honda 4. So yeah, we got that up and running. My passenger was my sister-in-law, and at the same time my brothers also got into sidecar racing. So 3 of my brothers were racing, my dad was racing, my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law. So it was a real family affair back then, really good times. Later on it started to get expensive, so we quit. Probably got a bit older too. So yeah, and after the bikes is probably when I started to think more along the lines of getting a car. My first car accident, well actually it was a motorbike accident. I was riding into Melbourne and it was a rainy day, tram tracks. The poor old Yamaha 360 I had at the time hit the tram track and I slid off, and the car just clipped the bike. Didn't do much damage, but enough to, I couldn't go to work that day. Did my ankle, but that was my first one. The second one was on a Honda 4. I came up to a T section once again in the wet. Tyres weren't too good. Tried to do a left corner and couldn't make it and got hit by a bus. Luckily, no damage to the, well, there was damage to the bike, but there was no damage to me. Just my pride. Car accidents wise, touch wood, the only one I've had at this stage is in there when we had the XF Falcon wagon, having 2 daughters in the car and we got hit by a tram. And that was my fault because the tram went round the corner and I didn't know. I thought it was going straight ahead. And that was, we're going in. I said to the girls, now, whatever you do, don't tell your mother. So what happened? We get home, walk in the door. Hey, Mum, we got hit by a tram. Yeah, good on you. My first car was a EJ Holden, 1963 model. Bought it off my grandfather for $100. Rebuilt the motor, did a few things to it, and that was my first car, and I got my licence and drove that for a number of years actually. Getting my licence was a bit of a challenge because I'd been used to riding motorbikes, so always rode basically down the middle of the road. The licence driving school, hopped in the car, first thing I do, drive down the middle of the road. So the pro instructor had to grab the wheel and quickly swerve it over to the left-hand side of the road, and he wasn't too happy. My licence test went okay. Got it first time, struggled a bit with reverse parking, and I still do. I'm hopeless at reverse parking. I hate it. Probably the biggest road trip I've done was back in 1974 on a motorbike. So I had a Honda 4, my mate had a Yamaha 250. Christmas time, we decided to go to Adelaide to go over and see his nana and spend a couple of weeks with her. Well, I don't know, but anyway, that's what we decided. So we get to Adelaide, spend a couple of nights, both look at each other and think, well, where to now? We're sort of a bit over this. So we look at the map and say, well, why not Perth? That's not that far. You're right. So off we went. We went to Perth. That was an enormous trip. Back in the day, the Nullarbor was a dirt road for 250 miles. So it was a huge, huge effort. I think one day we rode 18 hours. It was so hot during the day. We actually stayed in the pub. I think we stayed all afternoon, only had a couple of beers, but then we rode over night time when it was cooler, which looking back on it was probably stupid because there were kangaroos and emus and whatever else. We got to Perth, spent a week there and then rode back home. We were away for 3 weeks in total, so it was a fairly full-on holiday, but enjoyable at the time. Another one of these, when you look back on it, how the hell did we do that? Couldn't do it now, that's for sure. The cars that I've had, well, as I said, I started off with the EJ, sold that and bought a HQ panel van, a purple one. Did the usual thing, decked the back out, which I enjoyed doing that. Had that for a couple of years. Traded that on a brand new Sandman in 1977. Wish I still had that. But that was back when I had that for 18 months, and that was back when fuel prices started going through the roof. So V8s were not a good thing to have. So I traded that in on a brand new Gemini panel van. Oh, probably wish I still had that too. But anyway, had that for a number of years, and then I bought a WB panel van. Always liked panel vans. So I had the van, had the WB, then got married, and the panel van wasn't suitable anymore. First child came along, had to sell it. Bought a 1980 model VC Commodore wagon, bright orange. Everyone knew who it was. After that, had a 1980 ZJ Fairlane. Didn't have that for very long, but it was not a bad car, V8. Traded that actually on a XF Falcon station wagon. Had that for a few years, that was good too. Then we decided it was probably time to upgrade, so my wife said, okay, what are we going to get? I said, I don't care what you get, as long as it's not silver, automatic and a 4-cylinder. So she comes home, I found a car. I said, oh yeah, what is it? It's a Magna. Oh, really? She said, yep. I said, what motor? 6-cylinder? No, 4-cylinder. I said, and don't tell me it's silver. Yes. And it's a manual? No, it's an automatic. Seriously? The one thing I didn't want. Guess what? We bought it. And it was probably one of the better cars I've ever had. It was really good. Went well, towed the trailer. It was a good thing. So after a few years, we decided it was time to move on again. And we bought a 1992 Commodore station wagon. The V6, plenty of power, but it was a manual, so it took a bit of getting used to after having an automatic. But yeah, we enjoyed that one for a while. In amongst those period of times, I had a couple of utes which we used to use for work. Nothing special, a HR Holden and a Mazda B1800. So yeah, that got us through that period of time. Then we bought a Mazda 6, which was a yellow one. Was good because you could always see it in the car park. We had that for 10 years nearly. That was a good car. Then time for change again, and we ended up buying a brand new Kia Cerato a couple of years ago, 4 years ago actually. It's a good car too, for Korean. The old classic cars, I actually bought a 1947 Anglia back in 1995 that had been modified in the late 70s, had a V6 Capri motor in it, all Tirana running gear. So over a period of time I rebuilt all that and had that registered, and that was a lot of fun. I owned that for 25 years. I sold that just recently to my brother. Kind of regret it now, but things happen. And in 2002 I bought a Cobra, AC Cobra kit. Always liked the Cobras but could never afford to buy one that was going, so decided I'd buy one as a kit, because you know, how hard could it be to build one of those and get it registered? Famous last words. I had to source all the parts. When I bought the kit, it was basically just the body, which wasn't assembled 100%. All the doors had to be put on, all the inner guards, quite a lot of work to get it up to looking like a body. Chassis wise, it was all welded up and engineered, so that was all good. But I had to source Jaguar front and rear suspension and have all that modified to fit. So the axles were shortened, the cross member was narrowed. The transmission's an old C10 3-speed, which is all I needed. I didn't want anything too fancy. I wanted an automatic because there's not much room in the footwell to put a clutch pedal, so it was handy just having two pedals. The engine's a stock standard 5 litre out of a AU XR8. It's only the 185 kilowatt, 250 horsepower engine, but it goes good enough. 3 years later, I finally got it on the road and registered, and then had it painted, and I've had that ever since. Haven't done a lot of kilometres in it, but I just love driving it. Goes good, sounds good, looks good, always turns heads. I love it. My latest car I bought is a 1935 Chev, which has been named Clifford, of all names. Clifford has been a bit of a challenge. It's all stock standard, all original. Everything was working fine in it, so I thought, but one thing led to another. So I had the diff out, the gearbox rebuilt, just doing the engine now because it's done a head gasket or a cracked head. I'm not sure yet, haven't had it tested. So I've had it for 6 months and done about 10 kilometres in it. So yeah, bit of a sore point actually. The way my family would describe how I drive, probably the older I get, a bit more risks I take. I keep being told to slow down. I don't see that being an issue. The road's clear, I can go a bit faster. Yeah, no, not a good idea. I'm actually involved in the local car club here. We have runs, actually I have quite a few runs, I don't get to all of them, but we have a coffee and a catch-up morning for an hour or so. It's great because we all fix the world in that hour, and until the next Saturday, and we get together and we fix the world again. The club has got a lot of members, a lot of different cars, and not just one year, or they're not just vintage or veteran, they're all types of cars. A lot of different types of people, mainly older people, a lot of retirees like myself who've got time and probably a bit of money to go playing. I think the car side of things, or the engine side of things, stemmed from Dad. His father, from what I know, wasn't really into cars or mechanical things like my dad was. All my siblings are into motor cars, motorbikes, basically anything that's got an engine and goes fast. We're all into in one way or another, including my sister. I probably enjoy tinkering with cars as much as I do driving them. I mean, it's always nice to go for a drive, particularly in the Cobra. It's good fun to drive, people wave, it's a really good feeling. But also working on them is also enjoyable. To be able to fix something and put it back on the road and have it going again, give yourself a bit of a smirk and say, yep, I did that.